All right, so today we're going to get started with lesson 3 of classical grammar. So for your notes, make sure that you have your name and date at the top of the page. Classical grammar. Have the name of the course labeled. Classical grammar. Lesson 3. To begin, in your notes, let's quickly review what we did in the first 2 classes. In the first class, so this is just review. In lesson 1, we talked about letters of the English alphabet, compared them a little to Latin and Greek. We said that English has 26 letters, Greek has 24, Latin has 23. We looked at how letters are divided into vowels and consonants, and then we learned about special pairs of vowels that are called diphthongs. We then learned that vowels, consonants, and diphthongs are joined together to make syllables. That syllables are joined together to make words, and that words are joined together to make speech or to make sentences. So the key idea in grammar is we make speech by joining things together. We join letters to make syllables. We join syllables to make words. We join words to make sentences. And in reasoning, we learn that we join sentences together to make arguments. Our minds join things together. There are simple things. Our mind joins them together to make compound things, and then our mind joins together simple things and compound things to make more compound things. And we continue joining things together in our minds throughout our lives, and that's why our thoughts and our communication gets more and more complex the more we study, the more we exercise it, the more we use it, the more we practice. Little children are very simple. Ignorant people who don't study are very simple. But we have complex ideas to communicate, so our language studies allow us to communicate the complex ideas that we have. If we don't study language, we're like a person who, imagine if a person is, you know what it means to be dumb? It means you can't speak, right? I don't mean dumb like not smart. I mean dumb where a person can't speak. Can you imagine having ideas, having thoughts, having feelings, and not being able to talk? It'd be very, very difficult, you know? But when we don't study language, that's what we're like. We're like a dumb person who's not able to share his ideas, his thoughts, his experiences, his feelings, and so on. So for our own happiness, we need to study language so that we can communicate when our thoughts are complex, when we have feelings that are complex, not just simple, childish thoughts, but more mature, more complex thoughts, which we're going to have as we get older, have more experiences, and so on. So the first lesson, we looked and saw how we start with simple elements of speech, simple letters, and we join them together to form syllables. We then join syllables to form words. We join words to form sentences. We join and join and join. That's what our mind does. That was lesson 1. We learned that words are used to make speech. Words are used to make speech. And so because speech is made up of words, speech is like a whole and words are like parts. And so the words are called the parts of speech. And in lesson 2, we studied the parts of speech. And we learned that in English, I think the number we had was 10, right? We had 10 parts of speech in English. We listed 10 parts of speech. And what this means is that sentences are made up of words. Words are the parts of speech. But because there are thousands and thousands of words, we can't possibly study all the words before we speak. And so what we do is we divide the words into classes. We find that there are only 10 different classes of words. And so what we're going to do is we're going to study the characteristics of the classes of words. And when we know the characteristics of the classes of the words, then we'll know important things about all of the words in those classes. And it will help us to speak rightly. So in lesson 2, we studied the 10 parts of speech. And to test yourselves, you should be able to make a list of the 10 parts of speech. Okay? If you can't make a list of the 10 parts of speech, then you need to review lesson 2 and you need to study it until you can write out a list from memory of the 10 parts of speech. You have to know that. Okay? So we studied the 10 parts of speech in lesson 2. In this lesson, we're going to move on to lesson 3, and we're going to start studying the first of the parts of speech. I told you that the lesson on the parts of speech, when we have a list of the 10 parts of speech, that's basically an outline for the rest of our grammar studies, because that's what we're going to study. We're going to go through each of the parts of speech and learn all the characteristics of each part of speech. So we're going to study substantive nouns, then we're going to study adjective nouns, then we're going to study pronouns and participles and verbs and adverbs and so on through all of the 10 parts of speech. So the parts of speech make a table of contents for classical grammar. In this next lesson, lesson 3, the title of the lesson is The Division of Substantives. The Division of Substantives. So that's the end of our little review. Now let's get into our lesson. Lesson 3, the title is The Division of Substantives. The division of substantives, or substantive nouns. So the first part of speech that we learned were substantive nouns. The first part of speech we learned were substantive nouns. And what I'd like to do is just let's jump back to lesson 2 real quick. In lesson 2, in paragraph number 8, we learned what a substantive noun is, or a noun substantive. We said the name of every object, that has or is conceived by the mind to have an independent existence is called a noun substantive. The name of every object that has an independent existence. So substantive nouns are names of objects. Let's write this down for review. That have an independent existence. Substantive nouns are the names of objects that have an independent existence. And let's just talk about this for a minute before we move on. First of all, substantive nouns are nouns. And all the word noun means is a name. So when we see names here, that explains what it means to be a noun. Substantive nouns are names. They're names of things. But substantive tells us what kind of things. What kind of things? Things that have an independent existence. Things that have an independent existence. What in the world does that mean? Things that have an independent existence. Substantive nouns are names of objects that have an independent existence. If I write the word happy, happy, can happy exist by itself? No, it can't. Something has to be happy, right? If I say the word happy, that can't exist by itself. There has to be another idea. There has to be another idea joined to happy to allow us to make sense, to express an idea. We can't just say happy. Happy is not a substantive noun. Happy cannot stand by itself in speech, and that's what it means to have an independent existence. Independent existence means it's a name that can stand by itself in speech. It can stand by itself. A word like happy can't stand by itself. Happy is an adjective. It has to be added to something. Okay? A name that can stand by itself. Happy has to be added to something. So I have to say, happy man. Now happy makes sense because it's happy something. The quality of being happy is present in the man. Happy is not a substantive noun. But the name man can stand by itself in speech and express an idea by itself. It doesn't need to be joined to anything else because man is a substantive noun. Okay? Our book gives us some examples. Rose is a substantive noun. It names a thing. It names an object that has an independent existence. It can stand by itself in speech or in our minds and make sense. The name of a city, London or Paris or Rome. The name Rome can stand by itself. It's a substantive noun. It's a name of a thing that has independent existence. It doesn't have to exist in something else. An adjective can't stand by itself. It has to be joined to some substantive or some pronoun. So substantive nouns are names of objects that have an independent existence. They're names that can stand alone. And the title of our lesson in Lesson 3 is the division of substantives. And what that means is the different kinds of substantives. So substantive nouns, if you take them as a genus, remember yesterday we were talking? If you take substantive nouns as a class of things, and you think of all of the words, all of the names, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of names that are substantive nouns all together in one big group. And we were to look at that group and we were to say, can we divide these nouns into any smaller groups? Can these nouns be divided into smaller groups? The answer is yes. we can take substantive nouns and we can find that all of these nouns belong to one group, all of these nouns belong to another group, these nouns belong to another group, and we can have divisions of substantive nouns. And we can understand substantive nouns more clearly by studying the individual groups. Okay? So that's what we're going to study here in Lesson 3. We're going to take this big, giant collection of substantive nouns, every single thing that can be named, right? Book, desk, cup, chair, on and on and on. Every single thing that can be named, all of those names taken together in one giant class of names, we're going to see if we can divide that class into smaller, clearer classes of nouns. And that's the purpose of Lesson 3. Okay? So let me get to Lesson 3 here. Lesson 3, the division of substantives. So let's get started. I'm just going to read and comment on the lesson. The lesson starts with a little note to the teacher, and it says, when a student has learned to know what that a rose is a flower, a daisy is a flower, and so on, if you show it a buttercup or some other flower, it will probably know that that is a flower too. It will have the notion of a class of things which are alike in some considerable points or some important details, but they are unlike in others. So the point that this is making is that we have to make sure, in order to understand this, we have to make sure that students understand what a class of things is. Okay? And I trust that you do. A class of things would be like, I gave you an illustration in reasoning class yesterday with the cardinal, right? If I had a cardinal in my hand and said, what is this? You could say, it's a cardinal, or you could say, it's a bird. And if I had a blue jay, you could say, that's a bird. And if I had a crow, you could say, it's a bird. You understand that bird is a class of things that contains individuals, and maybe even smaller classes, right? So we need to understand that idea of classes in order to understand the division of substantives. And paragraph 19, we have really the beginning of this lesson. We're learned that such names, this is the first division of substantives, such names or nouns as denote any of the individuals that are contained in a class of things are called common nouns or appellatives. So the first class, the first division of substantive nouns are called common nouns. Common nouns are the first division of nouns. Make sure you're taking notes. Let's go. Your notes are your work. The first division of substantive nouns are common nouns. Names that denote individuals in a class are called common nouns. In other words, the name of a class is a common noun. All right? The name of a class is a common noun. So, for example, tree is a common noun. Not a specific tree, but any tree. Anything that can be called tree, that name for the thing is a common name. Student. Not the name of a specific student, not the name of an individual student, but the name student, which describes a whole class of individuals. Student is a common name. Man is a common name. Not an individual person, but man as a class. And the reason why it's called a common noun is because it's a name that's common to many individuals. A common noun is a name that is common to many individuals. You got that? Okay. A common noun. The lesson goes on to tell us a common noun is called common because it is common to every individual in the class or in the group. It's common to every individual in the group. That's why it's called a common noun. So anything that I can say about you or about others is a common noun. Any noun that I can use to name you and others is a common noun. Any name that I can use to only name you would not be a common noun. We'll see what that is in a minute. These are called common nouns because they're common to every individual in the group. They're also called appellative. So another name for common nouns is appellative. Another name for common nouns is appellative. This word appellative, the lesson tells us, comes from the Latin word appellare, which means to call. They are the names by which external objects are called. So appellative noun. But the name we're going to use for these is common noun. Common nouns. Excuse me. Next, our lesson makes a note for us just to clarify things. And it tells us that when we name materials, and I wouldn't say that this is a division of substantives. This isn't another class of substantives. It's just a note. When we name materials, we don't use individuals. So when we name a material, like we'll just remember it from science class, material just refers to any matter, right? Any material. So if we refer to water as a kind of matter, we don't use it in the plural sense. If I have a cup of water or 3 cups of water, I don't say I have 3 cups of waters. Any kind of material, cloth, cotton, we don't say cottons, we don't say steels, we don't say irons. Materials are always used in the singular. Just a note, not a big deal. They give examples in the book. Water, milk, sand, iron, money, grass. If you're referring to something as a material, it's used in the singular number. Paragraph 21, we learn about the second division of substantive nouns, which are proper nouns. The second division of substantives, proper. Proper nouns. Part of the problem with grammar is that these words aren't words that we commonly use. It's partly our fault too, because if we used different words in our daily speech, we would understand grammar a lot better. Common means common to many, right? Proper, the idea of proper means your own thing. Like in the Gospel of John, if you're studying Latin reading, in propria venit. We read the phrase in propria, that's the same word. Propria, do you remember what that means? In propria venit? His own. It means his own, right? In means unto or to, And then propria means his own. Propria. That's what proper means. Proper means your own, or an individual's own name. Proper name. A proper name is the name of a peculiar individual. All right? Proper nouns, the name for an individual. Common nouns are the name for a class. It's a name shared by many individuals. A proper noun is a name for an individual that's not shared with a group. Okay? The names of persons and places, that's not a very good definition. What it means is the names of individual persons and places. The names of individual persons and places are called proper names. And the book tells us they're called proper from being proper, that is, peculiar to the individual bearing the name. So an example would be someone's first name, your actual personal name, your proper name, John. John is a proper noun. It names an individual. And this can be a little bit confusing because you can say, wait a minute, there are lots of Johns in the world, right? There are thousands of Johns. So why isn't John considered a common noun, since John is a name that's common to many different people? Okay? That's confusing. The reason why first names are not common nouns is because first names are really important for families. In your family, everyone in the family shares the same last name. The last name is common to the members of a family. In our family, I'm Michael, my daughters are Michael, my wife is Michael, my sons are Michaels. We're all Michaels. Our first names are our individual names in our family. In our family, we refer to each other by our first names. That's our individual name. John, Elizabeth, David, Mary, and so on. Your first name is your individual name. Your last name in the family is a common name shared by everyone in the family. So we don't put Johns into a class of things because that's really not what first names are. When you join the military, they don't refer to you by your first name. They refer to you by your last name because that's your proper name in the military. Your family name is what distinguishes you from the other soldiers. It makes a lot more sense to call you by your last name in the military than by your first name because there could be a bunch of Johns and your last name may actually be what's unique to you. Okay? So you can see that in a family, your first name is your proper name, your individual name. So don't get confused by that. Another example would be the name of a city, Rome. Rome is the peculiar name of one city. The word city, the name city, is a common noun that refers to any city. But if we were to name one peculiar city, one individual city, Rome would be the name of an individual city. London, name of an individual city. And the same thing is true about the names of cities. That's true of first names. If you look on a map and study geography, you'll see that there are many cities called Rome. For example, in the state of New York, you'll find a city called Rome. But that's not the Rome. Rome is like a first name. In Italy, if you go to Italy, you will not find 10 different cities named Rome. Okay? So Rome is its peculiar name in its own country, in Italy. So names of individuals, their own individual name is a proper noun, a proper name. Okay? On to paragraph 22. Paragraph 22. Another class of substantives represent qualities or modes of action which are conceived by the mind as having an independent existence. Qualities or modes of action conceived by the mind as having an independent existence. When I have seen or read of a number of virtuous actions, I get the general notion of the substantive noun virtue. When I have seen a number of red things, I form the notion of redness, and so on. The names of such notions are called abstract substantives. So we'll list a third class of substantive nouns. Abstract nouns. Abstract nouns. Abstract nouns are nouns that are derived from adjectives. So if I say a red car, a red bird, a red shirt, a red apple, and I get this idea of what red means in all different things, that different things all share in the quality red, I can refer to that quality by itself. I can name that quality and I can call it redness. You see that? So abstract nouns are names of objects that are abstracted or drawn away from some more concrete ideas. Remember we learned abstract and concrete in arithmetic, right? Abstract means to draw away. Our textbook even has it for us. The Latin abstrahere means to draw away, because the ideas are drawn off or drawn away from what we perceive or what we sense. We take some concrete idea, like the color red, something that we see. We draw away from it an idea of what it means to be red, and we name this redness. And now we have a name of an idea that can stand by itself, so it's a substantive. Names of objects or ideas that are abstracted from sensible things. Abstract nouns. An example is redness. And you'll see this ending ness. You'll see that at the end of many nouns, and normally those nouns will be abstract nouns. Like I could say, that man is happy, that woman is happy, that dog looks happy, and I get this general idea of being happy, and I call that with a name, I call it happiness, right? Happiness. And that ending ness shows that it's a noun. Happiness. All right? Redness. Happiness. Sadness. Sad is not a substantive noun. But the general idea of what it means to be sad is sadness. And there are other examples of this. Our book gives us the example of virtuous. Something is virtuous. Something is virtuous. And I can think, this action is virtuous, that action is virtuous. I get an idea, a general idea of virtue, virtuous, and I can form a substantive like virtuousness, or just virtue. All right? Abstracted nouns. Moving on to paragraph 33. An abstract substantive, the name of an abstract idea. An abstract substantive is the name of a quality or property conceived by the mind as having an independent existence. So let's write this definition in our notes, which is nice and clear. An abstract substantive is the name of a quality or property. The name of a quality or property conceived by the mind as having an independent existence. I'll read it a couple times. An abstract noun is a name. First of all, it's a noun. It's a name. It's a name of a quality or property that is conceived by the mind as having an independent existence. An abstract substantive noun is the name of a thing conceived by the mind, the name of a quality or property. Abstract substantive noun. The name of a quality or a property conceived by the mind as having an independent existence. And let me share an idea with you about this that will help you with the study of philosophy. If we take the idea, follow me on this, this will help you to understand some philosophy we're going to get into in other studies. You see how it says the name of a quality or property conceived by the mind to have an existence? Plato, the philosopher Plato, had an interesting question about this idea. When we take an idea like redness, and we think of this idea of redness, what Plato wanted to ask is, does something called redness actually exist? Or is it just something that we think about? Our minds conceive of a quality. We think of this quality. And when I say redness, you all get an idea in your mind of what redness is. But what Plato wanted to know is, in God's mind, when God created the world, is there something that really exists, let's say in heaven, that is perfect redness? Is there something that exists that is actually redness? That is the test of all things that are called red. Is there some real thing called redness? And he called this a form. A form Plato believed that there exist perfect ideas of everything that exists. Everything that we can name, Plato believed that there was a perfect form of that thing that existed, that really existed. Okay, so if you call something a square, Plato would say, you've never actually seen a square. You've seen things that are like squares, that are close to squares, but you've never actually seen a perfect square. There exists, Plato would say, there exists a form of a square that is the perfect square. And when you see something, you compare it to that form, and you say, oh, that's a square. But what you really mean is that's like a square. When you say man, you've never seen the form of man, the perfect, or if I asked you, what would the perfect man be like? If there was some pattern that existed, some form, some perfect man that existed, what would that man look like? What would that man be like? That would be the form of man, what it means to be man in its perfect form. Plato had this idea that a perfect form of everything actually existed. And everything that we call by that name is just a comparison to that thing. But Plato believed that these ideas really exist outside of our mind. Outside of our mind. It's not just a name. It's actually an idea or a form that really exists, that exists in God's mind. You understand that? Okay? So there's a question in philosophy whether these things really exist as forms outside of our minds or whether we just make them up and talk about them. Okay? So what we see here with abstract nouns, it's the name of a quality or property conceived by the mind to have an independent existence. But our question is, when we say conceived by the mind, does that mean that we just imagine it and make it up? Or does something really exist? Does the perfect idea of a certain thing really exist outside of our minds and we simply talk about it? Okay? As we get into philosophy, you're going to see that that becomes an important issue. So abstract nouns, the names of qualities or properties. And you have to remember, abstract nouns have to be compared to adjectives because they're not the same thing. Happy is not an abstract noun. Happy is an adjective noun. Tall is not an abstract noun. The name of a quality. Tall is a quality. But that's not what this is talking about. Tall is a name that cannot exist by itself. Tall has to be joined to an object to exist in speech or thought. We have to say tall tree, tall man. Tall is not an abstract noun. What do you think would be the abstract noun for that? What do you think the abstract noun would be? Not tall, that's an adjective. What would the abstract noun be? Tallness, right? Tallness. So you can see how we take an adjective, we take a quality that's an adjective, and we turn it into an abstract noun that names an idea that has independent existence and can be used alone in speech. Abstract substantives. Things that are not abstract, nouns that are not abstract. So we have abstract nouns and something else. What do you think the other kind of noun is that's not abstract? Abstract and concrete, just like arithmetic. So the other kind would be concrete nouns. not only concrete nouns, but concrete substantive nouns. Okay, we're talking about substantive nouns. The lesson says, as distinguished from abstract substantives, the names of things that really exist. You see what that says? The name of things that really exist. Whoa, 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 whoa. We can't say that abstract nouns don't really exist. Our book says, concrete nouns are names of things that really exist. Concrete substantive nouns, the names of things that really exist. Sorry, I'm running out of space here. Names of objects that really exist, our book says. Plato would disagree with that definition because he would say abstract nouns really do exist. Right? He would say abstract nouns are names of things that really do exist. Redness really does exist. Squareness really does exist. Tallness really does exist. So I want you to see that. That idea that concrete things really exist, but abstract things don't really exist, Plato would disagree with that. He would say, no. The idea or the form of tallness really does exist. That's why we talk about it. When we look at somebody, we have this idea in our minds, this form of what it means to be tall, tallness, and we look at someone and we say, that characteristic of tallness is present in him. That characteristic of tallness is present in that tree. And we recognize that form in different things. Plato would argue that that idea, that abstract idea, really does exist. Remember Pythagoras talked about reality? Reality means things that don't change. Plato would argue that the forms are reality because they never change. Redness never changes. Your shirt may be a little bit red. Your shirt may be a little darker red. The redness in your shirts can change, but the idea of redness is perfect redness, and it never changes. Pythagoras would call that reality. So, we have to be careful when we talk about concrete nouns being things that really exist, right? What this probably means is concrete nouns are names of things that exist outside of our minds and in bodies, not as forms, but as actual sensible objects. Just because something is sensible doesn't mean that it's real. And anything that's not sensible is not real. Okay? Do you understand that difference? In modern studies, you're going to see this idea all the time because of modern science, that if something is not sensible or if something is not material, then it's not real. That's not true. Things exist that are not sensible. It doesn't mean they're not real. So abstract nouns are not the names of things that are not real. Concrete nouns are not the names of things that are real. Concrete nouns are simply the names of things that are sensible, and abstract nouns are the names of things that are not in themselves sensible. Okay, not material, I should say. All right. Abstract and concrete. So let's keep moving on here. Paragraph 25, we learn of another division of substantives. I'm running out of space up here. I'm going to erase this up top and add number 5 up here. Sorry, that's kind of ugly, but the fifth kind of substantive nouns are collective. Collective substantive nouns. And this is very easy to understand if you just think of a collective substantive noun is the name of a multitude. The name of a multitude. Any name that's used to refer to a multitude is called a collective substantive. It names a collection of things. So the singular form refers to a number of things. We name a multitude, so they can be a little confusing. If I said the farmer has a flock of chickens, is flock singular or plural? Flock. It's singular, but it refers to a multitude. You understand that? Because it's collective. It's a singular noun that refers to a multitude. So if I ask you, is flock singular or plural? The answer is, it refers to a multitude, but it's singular because it refers to the whole multitude. It's a collective noun. The name of a multitude. A nation. Is the noun nation singular or plural? It's singular, even though it refers to a multitude of people. It's a singular noun because it's a collective noun. It refers to a multitude. Okay? So a collective substantive noun is the name of a thing that can exist by itself that names a multitude as a whole. You got that? Collective noun. When we think about that group and we name it with a collective noun, we think about the group as one whole. So it's a singular noun that refers to a multitude of things. Because we name the group. A flock of chickens, a herd of sheep, a swarm of bees, a nation of people. Collective nouns. All right? And I believe that is all for the division of substantives. So, to review here, I think we're around 54 minutes, so I'm doing okay. To review, we learned that there are 10 parts of speech. The first part of speech is substantive nouns. We learned what substantive nouns are. You have to do the mental work of studying these definitions and learning what these things are. You have the notes on your paper. You have the teaching in the book. But the point of studying is to make those ideas your own by memorizing them, studying them, reflecting on them, so that the ideas become your ideas. You should be able to name the 10 parts of speech. If you can't name the 10 parts of speech, you have to review the names of the 10 parts of speech and memorize them. We're going to study them one at a time through classical grammar. Now in lesson 3, you have to take the first part of speech and you have to know the divisions, the different kinds of substantive nouns. We've learned 5 different kinds of substantive nouns. Common nouns, proper nouns, abstract nouns, concrete nouns, and collective nouns. We've learned 5 different kinds of substantive nouns. Those ideas are in your book. Those ideas are in your notes, hopefully. You have to study so that those ideas become ideas in your mind that you take with you. They have to become your own ideas, or else you learn nothing. That's what Socrates warned was the danger of writing. Socrates warned that writing is dangerous because it makes people think that they know things that don't actually exist in their own minds. For you to know grammar, you have to have the knowledge of these ideas in your own soul, in your own mind, and that comes through study. So what I'd like you to do to finish up this lesson in your notes is I'd like you to take a minute or two and write a brief summary of what we covered in this lesson. Write a brief summary of what we covered in this lesson, and that's the end for lesson 3 in classical grammar.